Hi, I'm June.
And I'm Carter. We're from Illinois, USA.
Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. As you heard, my guests today are Carter and June, also known as Rook and September on the Discord, two legends, two airsofters from Illinois who joined us at AMS Ironhorse a few weeks ago, two legionnaires, two people who I got to meet and hang out with and play some airsoft with very recently, and two people who some of the only people from the mainland North America who actually play in a community that is smaller than ours. We've talked a lot on the podcast before that the community in St. John's was not very big by a lot of standards, and when we started we were very, very small, and they also play in a small community, and they've been playing together for a couple of years, 2 years or about, and really this was their first foray into a big milsim event of this type, the first AMS game. It was mine too, and we were just thrilled to have all those to Legionnaires, as we've talked about at this event. But that's not what this is about. This episode is really about June and Carter and their experiences at this event, and also sort of the lead up to how do you prepare for that kind of event, especially if you live in a smaller community with a small airsoft community. So that's what we're going to talk about. So, gang, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled to have you on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you like the sound of this pitch I gave you.
Yeah, this is great. So I guess the first thing I would like people to hear from the two of you is, what is airsoft in your community like? So tell us a little bit about the amount of people that you play with, like how big your community is just in general, like so people get a sense of the size, and what kind of airsoft do you play currently?
Yeah, do you want me to talk about it?
I can talk about it.
Okay, go for it.
So our community is really small. There's a total of 4 of us, and the games we run are either like 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2, and it's definitely like the opposite end of the spectrum from what it was at Ironhorse. And
for real.
Yeah.
For me, what I did to prepare was to make sure that I could stay out in the field for a long period of time. So for me, that was something I really wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
And the games that we did play, I wanted to make sure that they lasted a while
Fortunately, like for us, that's super easy because we play on like an acre of private land.
Yeah.
Which is not a lot of space.
Right.
An acre is not as big as I always think it is.
But we make do with it.
Yeah, and we do. And
we
have the advantage of we can do whatever we want.
Yeah. Like we definitely there's definitely like moments where we could play like capture the flag or team deathmatch, or
it never goes well.
It never goes well, but it's nice to have that option to change the game. And
be able to make it ours.
Yeah, and in preparing for Ironhorse, it was important to know what sort of objectives there were coming up to Ironhorse, so that way, when it came to it, we were prepared. Yeah. So when it came to gathering intel or
whatever, really, just doing whatever, we were able to tailor the actual. I think, repeating basically what you said, but we were able to tailor our game time in the weeks leading up to what we were expecting out of Ironhorse, which is nice. We're talking about field.
I'm just curious, like in your where you live, and you don't have to tell us exactly where you live. That's not for the purpose, but like I'm assuming that the climate is not similar to what Ironhorse was like in terms of heat. Is that fair to say?
Right now, it's not super far off, but it's still probably 10 Fahrenheit hotter there.
Yeah.
And
a
bit. Not even really. It's a little bit hotter, but it's way more humid.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bother me. I lived in Georgia for a while, pretty close to Guardian Center, so I'm a little more used to it.
And what about yourself, Carter? Did you find the heat was brutal for you, or were you pretty well acclimated?
Yeah, he did.
Yes, I did find the heat was
almost
pretty brutal. But I mean, obviously after that episode, I was able to hop back up and get back in just because
Mhm.
I ran cross country all
Yeah.
4 years of high school. Putting that much energy out, it was something that I was used to. Um,
Mhm.
should I definitely have prepared better for the event? Absolutely. I think I definitely should have hydrated more. Um,
Yeah.
but
Damn, if only someone had told you that.
Well, listen, we're not going to throw any shade because I mean, the reality is like even for those who were prepared,
Yeah.
it was still a
Yeah.
very, very hard couple of days. So I don't think there's any. I
No,
don't think
I
there's any
mean,
blame to be thrown around, right?
all,
But yeah,
all,
I
all
definitely
truth
feel
be
that.
told, like, I'm a nut about hydration. Everyone in my family knows I drink more water than everyone in my family combined.
A true hydro homie. I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even still, I kept finding myself
Mhm.
like, oh my god, my mouth
So
is so dry. I'm so thirsty.
So you talked about, preparing for this event, and I think it's really interesting what you were talking about, how like there's still, even though your community is not very big and you can't, prepare for like, okay, how are we going to move with a platoon of 20 people or whatever, you can also control a lot of the other things that happen around, how
Yeah.
long you're out for a game and all this kind of stuff. So I thought that's a really interesting take. And you said, I think June, you said like, you have the space, you can do whatever you want. And there's also a lot of liberty that comes, I think, with having a smaller community like that, being able to be like, hey guys, like what do we want to do, and just being able to do that and adjusting on the fly. I'm curious, like what were there any particular skills like in specifically that you worked on individually as well for this type of event? Like are there things that you were really trying to focus on to get sort of dialed in?
We did like several hours of just running around, falling down and pretending to get hit, and then the other one coming and medicing
Okay.
in
Yeah.
the style that they had prescribed for AMS and that I had seen on videos of prior Iron Horses.
Mm-hmm.
And we just practiced getting medicked and getting dragged and making sure our kit was
practical.
secure enough to do that and made that possible. Yeah.
And one thing that I definitely worked on focusing on was target acquisition.
Yeah.
Especially
Always.
with how different,
Always, baby.
especially with how different the environments are with our field and Iron Horse. Like
we played
our field,
just in woods.
it's just trees. Like there's no buildings and there's like no substantial cover.
Not even dense trees. It's not like if you're just standing there, you still gotta kind of look. Like in ours, you're still. A lot of times, I could still see you when you're trying to hide.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
And
Kind of
so,
sparse.
I mean, and there's some benefits to that because, I mean, there's trees everywhere.
We're both pretty good at using cover.
And for me, it was, I sort of, when I was working on target acquisition, it was more using the trees as my targets and seeing how fast I could shoot each tree that I wanted to. And if I got stuck in like a reload, making sure I was behind cover and I was doing the reload effectively and efficiently. Really, what I was focusing on was the firefight aspect, not really what we did for the first bit of the game was holding that building 1-8.
I mean,
yeah.
Really, what we did there at the beginning, that's exactly what I had hoped for, baby.
I mean, and yeah,
absolutely. That was just me with my DMR shooting people far away.
Yeah.
I mean, half of what I did up there was just like, oh, bring your scope over here. We need to see.
Yeah.
We need PID.
Yeah. And I mean, the good thing about building 1-8 was there was this little
preps. Prep. Talking about preparation.
That's fine. That's fine. Just keep going. Keep going with building 1-8. I love it.
So in building 1-8, there was this window about, it was like closer to that tunnel entrance where it had that perfect view of that tunnel entrance. And I know for us, cost guys kept pushing that tunnel entrance for a good portion of that game.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
all day, man.
And that's where the preparation comes in. When they kept rushing, it was so easy for however many riflemen were in that window. And I think we had Fox in that window downstairs too.
Fox downstairs, Galen and myself upstairs.
Dream team.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me,
Just laying hate down.
Impenetrable
no,
wall.
and that's exactly what it was. As we saw cost guys trying to rush that entrance, we just lay down a wall of plastic.
We just
So
blastoed the blasto, man.
Yeah.
And
Blastoed the plasto. There we go.
and like talking about it, I can see how useful it was to switch between trees and see how well I could effectively switch between targets after I hit them. So
yeah.
that was something I definitely
dear.
worked on. It was something I definitely worked on as we were getting prepared for this event. And I don't know, it was also something I was nervous about too at the event and leading up to the event, because for me, I wanted to perform well. And I wanted to perform well, and I wanted to take in as much information and learn as much as I could from you guys especially.
Yeah.
It's so funny to hear you say this, because this is like, it's legitimately like exactly the same stuff that I was thinking about myself. Like, number one, I wanted to perform well, right? Number two, I didn't want to hold anybody back. That was my second thing, right? But I also wanted to learn as much as I could from people who have like all the experience, like rolling with airborne guys. Are you kidding me? Like, let's go.
So
Give me
cool.
as much information, right?
That was huge.
And then the other piece, and you, when I hear you talk about like your target acquisition training and stuff, it's like really narrowing down on what are my controllables? What are the things that I can actually control, so that when I'm getting out there and I'm, acquiring targets, I don't have to think about it. I know I can do that. It's just muscle memory at this point. That way I can focus on the other stuff. And what you're talking about is exactly the same sort of stuff that I was thinking about. And really, I think that's what paid the biggest dividends, because the rest of it, you can learn on the fly and you can adapt and all this kind of stuff. But if you're going out there and you practiced, something that never ever came up, to the detriment of not practicing target acquisition or reloads or whatever, which one is probably going to be more important, right? So I think like this sounds like it's really, really, really cool that what we're hearing from you guys is the same kind of stuff that, we've been talking about, which is that it doesn't matter how big your community is, you can still get really like bomb ass good, like you guys, at doing these things without having the benefit of having, being able to go out there on a random weekend and play with like 100 people like they do in like California or whatever.
And like to our detriment, like even if we're running a 2v2, there's only 2 other people to shoot at. And
and it's all like, there's no structure to it. It's nature, man. Which kind of was an issue for me, because I was running an HPA DMR and had no real way of testing its limits.
Yeah, so that's really interesting actually too. So not only did you decide to go to like a huge event for your first like national level event, but you also decided to play a specific role that gave you additional, I guess, additional benefits, but also limitations, right? Like rules that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So how did you prepare for that? Like, what were your controllables that you were trying to lock in on before you went out there?
I was really worried about my reliability. Like, I mean, whatever my role, whatever, at the end of the day, if my gun shoots a BB consistently, even if the settings are wrong, even if this doesn't work the way I planned, I can work with something that is consistent. If it wasn't consistent and reliable, that was my fear. So that was the big thing I was working, was just making sure that I was getting, I think 0.2 joule variance between shots, and I still want to improve that, but pretty close. And like making sure my trigger didn't stick, which big help that was. It did before we even started the game.
So, do you run? Is it Kythera that you run in your replica?
Yeah, it's a Kythera.
Cool. Yeah. I remember. We had a really fun interaction. I talked about it on the last episode, but of me being like bumping into you on the second day, like, can you range those guys? You're just like, yeah. Like, and it was really interesting to me, because I never I didn't know what I didn't know, but like at the time I was like, I didn't realize just how small the community was, and like we hadn't had the conversation about how like, I didn't really have any time to figure out if I could do that or not, and you just had that confidence, like, let's go. But I guess you had a full day of
Yeah,
hosing guys with it to
I
figure that
had
out.
all of Saturday to kind of learn it, and
Yeah.
that was my when we got on field, my first action really outside of fob was okay. That's how far I can hit. Great.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a really good strategy. So aside from the prep, so now you're coming in and you're hitting Ironhorse, and we're hanging out on like Friday and getting to meet each other and all
Yeah,
this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, we didn't get to hang out at the
yeah,
cookout
we
on
were late.
Friday. You got
Yeah,
sucked into Walmart, which is it
we got
happens. I
sucked
get
into the
it.
black hole that is trying to find liquid IV at Walmart.
Um, but so when you hit the field on Saturday, like what were your impressions like? Because when we were at the like the faction event and stuff, and like the safety brief and stuff, we didn't really get a chance to look at the. You could see the field from a distance, but like you didn't get to
Yeah.
see it up close. What was your impression like as soon as you hopped on the field? Like what stuck out to you the most?
When walking onto the field, well,
For me, it was its
I
sheer scale, like just
Yeah,
how big and how many possibilities there were, if that makes sense. Like
yeah.
with all those buildings, like there were so many possible nests and so many possible points where you could have a view of a street and be able to control a good section of
so
that
much
city.
of the field.
And
Mm-hmm.
for me, walking onto that field, I was looking at every building. I was looking everywhere to see what kind of spots would benefit us as a team, but as well as myself.
This is perfect comedic irony here. Because here was Carter walking on field, appreciating the scale, and all I was focusing on the whole walk to fob was, oh my god, if this cart breaks, I am going to be murdered. Because the cart that I was using, the battle wagon we used, is not mine. It was lent to me,
Yeah.
and I watched Todd's break, and then that was all I could think the whole walk was, oh, I'm gonna have to replace this. That sucks. So I didn't even, like, I was trying to appreciate it, but I'm soaked, I'm, like, super heavy, I'm trying to drag this cart, hoping it doesn't break,
Yeah.
and still smiling, and, like, Frosty and I just huffing and puffing, dragging that thing.
And then like the other piece really that I think was a really unknown factor for me and for you I'm sure as well was what was it going to be like to roll with people who you've never ever met before.
For
like
real.
understanding that like well, we know each other from the Discord and stuff, but we don't know what our playstyle was like. I mean, like Jordan, one of the mods and
Yeah.
a really good buddy of mine. We've talked so much. We've never played airsoft together, so
Yeah.
like, how am I supposed to know what it's going to be like? So I wonder, what was your perspective on that too? Because like, I don't know how much you had talked to anybody else in the lead up as well.
We have, we have like our one other person that we play with, and I mean technically two, but Sarah doesn't count.
And did you talk to anybody like on the that you knew were going to be in Foxtrot 2 with you?
Oh yeah.
Did you talk to anybody ahead of time to like coordinate, or what was that like for you?
We had a group chat going
that I sadly did not make it to.
He didn't make it in. There's a 10-person limit. We had 12, so.
And
okay,
it was him and one of the Nomad boys.
And I mean,
make it.
And it was okay for me because I'm not a very social person myself.
He's not social, and also I am cursed.
Social enough for two people?
I'm cursed to be an organizer. So
it worked out.
Carter can attest. I get stressed out. And I know every detail of every down to the minute when we need to be places.
Yeah. And I mean,
so what
for me, like actually like meeting you guys, I was definitely it was fantastic. It was a wonderful experience, and it felt like I had known you guys for years. Like it just felt that natural.
We've all been saying this.
But
I felt the same way.
For me, I had to get used to the fact that I was playing with you guys, and it wasn't going to be just me and June out on the field. Like it was going to be me, June, and
remembering that oh,
six.
I can yell into this room and have other people come help me. I can
Yeah,
get help with stuff
Mhm.
instead of just like, well,
time to
here
go
I
do this
am.
alone. But
Yeah.
Yeah, that was huge. Like I worked that into my brain really fast. Tried to. But even as far as Sunday, I found myself like, wait a minute, hold on, I can ask for help.
and that was one thing that I realized too was I could have communicated everything. Like if I wanted to go push this building, or if somebody needed me to go run out to this car or to this building or whatever, I I would happily volunteer myself just because it's just who I
Yeah.
am. I'm always like
Mhm.
Johnny on the spot, like send me. I will do it.
I kept
Yeah.
volunteering him for things, and he kept just being like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point I came up to you and was just like, hey Phil, use Carter as your runner.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
didn't know about that when I said it. And then I walked over and was like, hey, you're doing this for Phil.
But and then I mean, and there was a moment where I was with Jimmy, Chris, and a few, and I think like two other members from Foxtrot 2, and there were some other guys from a different squad. And we were stuck in this building that had only one way in, and Jimmy needed someone to run out to this decrepit Camaro, and
Mhm.
Like Camaro.
I was like, I'll do it. I'm fast. I can do it. And it was so cool because the moment I ran out to that car and set up and was like making sure I was covering, it
Mhm.
was so cool to see Jimmy run out to me and then the rest of the team run out to me.
Yeah.
And I felt so
Yeah.
it,
Backed up.
I felt so backed up and I felt so reliable, if
I
that
have a
makes
little I
sense.
have a
Yeah.
little side note. For those of you who didn't go to Ironhorse but are listening at home, really you can't oversell enough how wild this place was. He said he came up on a decrepit Camaro. We're not talking like a, you know,
Like a
late 90s.
1969.
We're not talking late 90s,
It was a 2011
it was a
Camaro.
2011 Camaro, like, and not like made of foam or some shit. Like,
It
it was a
was I
real
Yeah.
car.
I walked past that car and was like, "Damn, that poor Camaro!" Like when we were
Yeah.
walking onto the field, I saw it and I was like, "I wish I had
Yeah.
that car." Like, it, and that's how it was for most of like my time out on that field. Like, I would look at a place and I'd be like, "I wish our field was like this," and it's so sad because we were planning on going out to the field today just to shoot the stuff.
Yeah.
not,
So not even better.
not even better.
Yeah.
Um,
Not better. No.
um, but as I'm thinking about it, like our field is so sad compared to Iron Horse, and like
It's we haven't even yet played
we haven't
since
played
Iron Horse.
in
I
a
just,
Mhm.
I mean, we have this issue where if one person can't make it, there is really
yeah.
not much point in going out there. So,
Yeah.
and our one other guy can't ever make it, which is fine.
It's
I mean,
fine.
we all
Like,
have
whatever.
lives.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting. I mean, like I think when I look at obviously the Guardian Center is an absolutely insane place to play.
Yeah.
Like that moment that you had where you're on that Camaro and you're like, oh my god, that's a Camaro or whatever. It's like same thing with me. It's like, oh yeah, there's enemy behind that MRAP or that MRAP, and you're like,
That's an
I
MRAP.
just said that.
The
I
bit
just said
for me,
that.
I
Those
think-
words just came out of my mouth,
Right.
and I'm not playing Irma. Like
I don't remember.
that's
if,
crazy.
I don't remember if you mentioned this in an episode here since then, or if it was just at Iron Horse. But at some point, someone said like, "Oh yeah, that's one of the MRAPs," and I was like, "What do you mean one? There's another."
Yeah.
And there is.
Yeah, it's so. I feel you. I think though, I would also say that AO being the way that it is also it's the kind of thing you only want to play every now and then, because
For
I would
sure.
never want that to lose its luster. Like I would hate to be the person who's played at Guardian so much that they're like, nah, maybe I'll skip Guardian this year.
Nah,
Like, are you
and
kidding
I
me?
even
Right.
Like, I would play there every single time. But I also I take your point. Like, when you've seen that and you go back to your home field and you're like, wow, okay, so we have literally nothing but trees, and like, what are we going to do with this, or
Yeah.
what can we even
I mean,
do, right?
it's like wow, I got more engagement in one building one time than I do in a full Sunday
yeah.
at our field, just because
Mhm.
I mean, the buildings were the size. I think that building 18 that we were holding all Saturday morning, I think that building's almost the size of our whole field if you lay out all the floors.
Yeah. And and speaking of engagement, like with our field, it's like you can see somebody and start shooting. With Iron Horse, it was you would have to think about your shots and
Yeah.
really time them
Well,
because
and not to mention, like, not any disrespect to our other two people, um, but like, people that have more airsoft experience, we've all not been playing for as long as a lot of the people at Iron Horse, I would assume.
Mhm.
I can't imagine that
Some of them.
rentals are just like, yeah,
let's
We'll
go
go to-
drop $275.
Yeah,
I'll return a
yeah.
ticket. That sounds fun.
Um,
Yeah, like, we just,
But there's definitely, I think one of the things that really struck me, and I don't know if I know, June, you had told me you played airsoft in other places as
Yeah.
well. Like, one thing that struck me about Iron Horse is that if you take a slice of airsofters from any field, you just see that same sort of slice replicated multiple times over, just
Right.
in
yeah,
scale.
for sure.
So I remember, like, when I was in Chrono, like, there was somebody behind me, and they were asking me, like, it was like a dad and their kid. They're like, "Oh, you have a light on your replica. Should he have a light on his replica too?" And I was like, I mean, that's not for me to tell them,
like it's
but
up to
like,
you.
But yes.
probably, right?
For
Like,
sure, yeah.
But clearly this person had never played a game like this before. So, like, I would expect that you might see some of that. I take your point though. Like, my expectation going to Iron Horse is very much like, all these people are going to be like dialed hardcore players who know everything about everything.
That's what I
And
was
the reality,
expecting.
I think,
And then we
was
ended up
not actually
right.
like that, right?
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
I was really worried. Like, it's been a while since I've played a big game. It's been longer since you have. And I was like, man,
Mm.
like I don't even have anyone to compare my abilities to other than the couple people we play against. And like, that's not a wide enough selection for me to be comfortable being like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm in a good spot skill wise. So I was just hoping and praying, and then I feel like we ended up doing fine.
And building off that,
Yeah.
for me, it was, I mean, yes, I was worried about like how my skill would compare to others, but I mean, even then, like the moment I walked onto that field, I was dialed in. Like I was ready to go. My adrenaline was pumping. Like at that point, the moment the game started, I wasn't even caring about my skill level. All I wanted to do was go out there and have fun and watch how other people
For
operate.
real.
And
It was, I had, again, like I said earlier, like he can attest, I had so much stress leading up to the game and like that morning, and then as soon as that black smoke popped and we started running, I was just like, all right, I'm out here with the boys. We're gonna do this. We're gonna win this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we did a solid job of that.
It's funny because, again, I would echo your sentiment. Like, I felt the same way. Like, I was like, oh, I don't know, like, I want to do well. As soon as it started, and I want to go back, Carter, to that story that you were mentioning, like when you're on the Camaro and like Jimmy put you there, and then moments later he's coming out and the rest of the squad is coming out, and you're feeling like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Right. And also, like, this is really cool. Like, that's that's also a lot of like sort of how I was feeling, because I remember just being like surrounded by people and be like, with these people around, I can do literally anything.
Anything.
Everything
Yeah,
is possible,
And
yeah, for
right? Like
sure.
we're gonna win this weekend. Yeah, with these guys around, and then we got Big Red trucking on behind us, and like we can do anything, man.
yeah.
Anything.
And
Right?
and that
That's
was
so I feel that.
and that was something that definitely overcame me when I started running with like a squad. Like it wasn't just me and
It
like
was
it was all of
us.
us. Like it was we were
Mm-hmm.
a unit that worked cohesively
Yeah.
together. And for me it was something that was appalling and amazing, and just being in that spot and experiencing that was so it changed how I'm going to play the game. It
Me
changed
too.
how I see the game.
I think all
and
of us, right?
and that moment will always like I will always look back on that moment fondly. Like I did that and I felt like I was like on top of the world. Like, yeah, I just ran to that Camaro and I covered my boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a bit towards it was in the evening after the sun had gone down. I we were just like, we need this building. We're pinned down by guys in that building. What can we do? And um I walked over to Jimmy and I was like, hey, why don't we just like put me and Galen up in this other building? We'll crossfire, send a couple guys in with grenades and whatever. I came up with this plan and Galen and I went up, and there was this really cool moment that I've been talking about since I left, where I got to just be up in a window with my gun, supporting the boys while they ran across to go take out a bunch of dudes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's so hardcore and so cool. How is this?
And you made that happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I mean, the
yeah.
whole time. No, really, though, I didn't. I had the idea. Who made it happen was. I mean,
All of
you
us.
and Carter and Jimmy and Chris and Fox and Galen and everybody. And I was a DMR player that had a good idea. Whatever. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel you, but I think you probably like give yourself a little, you're humble, I get it, but like give yourself a little bit more credit. Like, I think
Yeah.
there's this point where of satisfaction, which is,
I mean,
I don't
for
think
sure.
it's hubris, and I don't think it's being like cocky to just be like,
Yeah.
you know what? Like, that was I had a good
Yeah.
idea and we executed
I
on
guess-
it as a team.
I guess I mean to
right?
say,
But,
I get the satisfaction out of. I found satisfaction
Yeah.
in. Hell yeah, we just did that. Like, we as a team just did something that sounds. Like, when I write it out, it sounds like something you would see in a video game or a war movie or something. And, like, no, that's actually what we did. And we did that just, like, on the fly. Like,
Yeah.
it was nothing.
And there were so many
There's-
moments like those where if you took it from like an outside perspective, you're like, are we playing Call of Duty? What is this? 13 hours?
We're
Like,
just like, that's so cool.
and like looking at it from an outside perspective, like we look so cool. like on
Yeah, we did.
and some of those
Yeah, we did.
and some of those pictures, like, oh my gosh,
Just-
like just how
Just don't
well-
ask my parents for their opinion on whether or not we looked cool.
just how well put together we all looked in those photos. It was so beautiful, and
For real.
it just
Mhm.
again it even like out in the field, like looking at people, like it made me feel immersed and it made me feel in the zone, and
Yeah.
it was just
that's
amazing.
why they have uniform regs, right?
Yeah.
Like that, because it creates that. It's so funny to hear you say that, because I feel so similar. Like, I played airsoft this weekend, yesterday, in fact, and at time of recording yesterday, that is. And I said to the guys before we're getting ready the night before, I was like, guys, like, let's just dress CDF, and they're like, what do you mean? Because they weren't.
Oh,
Iron Corps.
no.
It's like, like civilian defense force. Like, let's just dress in civvies, and they're like, really? I was like, yeah. Just like khaki pants, whatever shirt you want, flannel, let's just do whatever. And then whatever tack gear you want on top, you can look as hard on the tack gear as you want, but just, regular clothes. And they're like, all right, let's do that. So like one of the
Awesome.
guys like, I don't have a flannel shirt. I'm like, I got you. Don't worry. It wasn't too hot. So we played dressed in like I would never have done that before, and I was like,
We look
this
so
is
cool.
this is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
We look so
Actually,
cool.
we did
man.
look
yeah.
pretty great.
Yeah.
I was wearing this shirt on Saturday.
Legit, right?
Got
Like
this bad boy for
yeah.
$5.
Or like seeing pictures of like the guys wearing all their like, you know, Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah,
Big
the
Red
dad
with
squad
like
was
I think
awesome.
yeah. And Big Red was wearing this like pink splotched shirt that was
Yeah.
like so loud a blind person could see it. Like, but like just absolutely hilarious, right? And I'm like, this is so cool. Like this is a lot of fun. And I think we didn't take ourselves as a team too seriously as a consequence of that. And I think
Right.
actually we probably ended up having more fun on the day of
Oh, for
because
sure.
of that, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I'm curious though.
I also think there's something to be said about just like, you know, we all unite under this common set of beliefs where it's just like, hey, you know, this is a game that we find the most fun out of by not taking ourselves
Yeah.
super seriously. And other people, and I think a lot of people that attended this event take it a lot more seriously, and whatever, to each their own,
Yeah.
for sure.
I do think we take the game seriously
Yeah.
without taking ourselves seriously.
Right.
So like we want to do a good job. Like we are, you know, self-driven in our own minds and personalities to want to be good and improve
Yeah.
and come to the table with as much skill and personal like sort of not credibility, but you know, as much personal skill as we can bring to the table, so we can be a good team player.
Right.
But at the same time, like we're here for the vibes, right? And like we can manage both of those without like yelling or like, you know, we've talked about this on the show before, like just being like, you know, crotchety or whatever because that's the hardcore sergeant thing from them. It's like that's not what we're here for.
That's like that was
let's
one of
have a
your
good
first
time.
episodes, even.
Yeah, and like I keep saying it because some people still haven't gotten the memo, but not you guys. Like just in general out there.
Yeah,
I think we did
Carter's
a really good
just-
job of
he's like a drill sergeant.
yeah.
I'm a real stickler for
so-
the rules.
Yeah. But Carter, I want to come back to something that you said, and you know, I'm curious to hear you expand on this. Like you said that this event has changed your perspective about airsoft. It's going to change the way that you play airsoft. I'm curious, what do you mean by that? Like, how is that manifesting in your own mind? Because I do feel similar things as well. I'm just curious to see what that means for you.
So, I mean, going back to like whenever we got into a firefight, when it's out on our field, like if I spray enough shots, I'll hit somebody. Like
Yeah.
if I
Usually me.
if I spray enough, I'll hit. But there, like the cover was so dense and so real, if that makes
So
sense.
usable.
Like I really had to think about where I was shooting and what I was shooting at, because out there ammo does matter. I was out there with five mid-cap magazines that
Yeah.
before even Ironhorse started were having feeding issues. So
Mhm.
Oh, we were just talking about this morning.
and so when I'm coming out onto that field, I'm like, okay, one, I need to be smart with my ammo. Two, if my magazines start acting up, I need to reload and just grab a different magazine. Granted, that second problem never happened. Somehow my gun was like, you know what? I'm going to perform just fine now.
Yeah, you didn't have feeding issues
Not
at all,
one.
which is
Not one.
I brought
Mhm.
all of my extra M4 mags and like had them not with the M4 so that because I expected him to need them.
And
Right.
so
And
out there in the AO, it was crazy because I was really thinking about like, okay, maybe I need to place my sights here because that's where somebody could be. It was a lot of like, where could somebody pop out of?
Yeah.
And especially
It
with
was a
those
lot more
3-story buildings.
tactics than
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, especially with those 3-story buildings, like people could come out of anywhere. And so with my hybrid sight, like I was flipping that thing off and on
Yeah.
just because like I wanted to be able to see close, but I wanted to get the full picture of the building just so I didn't
Yep,
miss anything.
yep.
This man uses a hybrid sight better than most people I've ever seen. He's so
Lots
good
of
with
practice,
it.
eh?
He's so good with it.
And
I will say there's something that's, you know, I've said it before. We are all immune to cringe. We dress up as soldiers and shoot each other with toy guns. But regardless, it is still like feels cringy to me that I feel like the amount of Ghost Recon Breakpoint you and I play, it
It
was
was useful. Oh my! And
but
don't.
well, because there's a lot of, I mean, it's a video game, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and a lot of the game is set in these like one, two, three-story buildings, and in and
Mhm.
around like stuff that is what Guardian Center imitates. Like,
Gotcha.
that's it's the same. It's emulating the same thing, and so there's a lot of like in our brains the thinking about the windows above that I think like we do because we played those games.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's something that I'm definitely going to take out to our field with us is, I mean, yes, it's easy to see somebody
I
run.
mean, not watching second and third
Right.
story windows. We don't.
Yes,
We don't
gotcha.
have windows.
It's easy to watch somebody run behind a tree and just hold your aim down on that tree. But I mean, there's still so many possibilities. They could peek out from either side of that tree. They could peek out from lower.
Mhm.
They could peek out
Their
from
other
higher.
teammate could
Their
exist.
their other teammate could pop out from another tree and
Could
take you
exist
out.
hypothetically in a few years.
And so
One day we'll get
Mhm.
somebody else.
to me, when I was out there, it was I definitely had to remind myself more times than one to zoom out, like take my hybrid sight off and look
Yeah.
elsewhere to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Because for me, that
Right,
was
yeah.
an issue at our field
Yeah.
coming up to
You're getting
Ironhorse
too lasered in.
was I definitely got tunnel vision
Yeah.
looking down my
Yep.
sight, and that was something I wanted to work on before Ironhorse, and it was something that I worked on during Ironhorse.
Yeah, I think now that we've had that, I think now you've probably got her down.
Yeah.
I noticed a
Yeah, you got
I noticed a change in your gameplay over the course of Saturday.
Yeah.
well, I mean, if it's not too surprising because that's a long time to be out there, and you
Well,
get
yeah.
so many reps of doing the same thing over and
Yeah.
over and over that I mean, you'd have to not be paying attention to what you're doing to just coast.
Yeah.
Right by the end of it, you'll be like, okay, no, this feels a lot more comfortable. It definitely should if you're doing
Yeah,
it a lot.
I mean
right?
we've been sort of like ha-haing about it, but the first like 2 or 3 hours on Saturday, you guys in Fox One were holding the tunnel, and we were holding a building for hours. Like, eventually, you're gonna be good at. Oh, guy comes around cover, and I know exactly where to aim to hit him because my BBs fall by that time.
Yeah.
And another
well,
thing.
I mean, we had a. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Another thing with like, I definitely watched my BBs as I
You're
shot them out of
finally
the
starting
gun.
to get that.
Well, no, not finally, but like, as I'm out there and I see how the BB reacts to the environment, like seeing how it
Mhm.
curved in the wind, seeing how it interacted with like
Yeah.
structures. It was definitely something you had to take into account for when you're trying to take somebody out.
Yeah.
Like,
And I mean, it definitely played a lot more of a factor there because there was so much more open range.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
at our field, like, I don't run my DMR as hot as I did for Ironhorse. I run it about rifleman level because
if you did,
then I like, with the same AMS minimum engagement distance, I can't shoot you on our fields.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're too close for me to be comfortable doing that. So, and like, I was turned up as far as I could and still not able to range people a lot. And that was like, we don't use those ranges, so getting to them it's an interesting adjustment.
So before we get on to sort of, the what now and like coming back, I'm just curious, what would be, I mean, we'll start with Carter. What's your golden moment, would you say, like from Iron Horse? The one that, really, you talked about the Camaro, but like if there's something else that you really will stick with you or that you keep playing back in your mind being like, this is legitimately the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. Airsoft wise or otherwise, I don't know.
I think it was both of our squads together when we were that first assault on that lake houses as like dusk was falling. That was something I will always look upon because all of us together in that moment, just like up on, like, granted we couldn't hop down, even though I was so ready to just hop down and book it
Oh,
into
are
one
you
of
break
talking
your
those.
about?
ankle,
Are you
yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
in the
Yes.
night when we were all up on that
Yes.
berm and?
I was
That was awesome.
I was
yeah.
damn near ready to just jump down that wall and book it because I mean I was ready to, but it was a moment of all of us up on that berm just shining our flashlights down into those lake houses and just lighting those windows up. It was and it was such a cool moment because like you got to think what those cost guys were thinking. They're all of a sudden there's just light through those windows and
And
Mhm.
BBs flying.
100 BBs.
Like,
yeah.
You got to stay down, otherwise you're done.
Yeah.
And
Although that particular mission did not work out
no,
so well for us in
no,
the
no,
end.
it didn't. But at the
Go.
at the
Too
same
bad.
time, it was such a cool moment for us.
Yeah,
though.
that
like
was-
all of us as a unit, like being like, yeah, let's go mess up these.
The
lake
sun was
houses.
just set enough that you could still see, but it was like everything was dark, but the silhouette around you. So like
Oh, and
I
then,
was watching
Yeah.
all our guys like the little laying down up on the berm as I'm coming up behind it because I was in the back of our little pack and watching everybody walking up and like laying down like that was so good.
and
That was the same thing I was gonna say.
another thing was
It
so
was sweet.
as night fell and you could see like the city with like all the lights and stuff and like the smoke in the city, like that whole period of time was just so aesthetic.
It was
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like granted, like yeah, no, it did not go the way we wanted, but for all of us it was such a cool like unifying moment for us,
Yeah.
for us, just all of us to be like, let's go assault these lake houses and let's mess stuff up. So for me, that's something I will always look upon and just be like, that was so cool.
It was also just we're talking about the just like how cool and grandiose it was, but then there's also at one point I can't remember which of our LMG gunners it was. One of our LMG guys went down. So Matt pops his disconnect on his gun and runs over and tries to drag him down. Gets shot, or like rolls down the hill a little bit. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, now I know what I need to do. Drag him down the hill. So I pop my disconnect and run over and get shot and roll down the hill a little. And I was like, in hindsight, who could have seen this coming?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that moment fondly as well. It was very I was like think about that Denis Villeneuve movie Sicario, and then like
Yeah.
they're going down into like whatever, like you see the silhouettes of everyone. And I definitely remember like we were moving in the defilade, and then trying to get into watching people get in positions, and me being in the rear, being like, this is crazy cool. Like just, and I mean, it didn't work out, and that's not really the point. Like it, like you said, it was so cool, so aesthetic. I'd same vibe. I remember like looking in the village or like in the town, and you could see all the lights and the smoke and all this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking like, yeah, we don't have nods. That's where we should be. Where all the light is.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing out here in the dark? But that's
For sure.
That was so. June, pick another moment because you were going to pick the
Okay.
same one. What's another one for you? It's a golden moment.
There really was something about the big failed assault that we did. I don't even have to say any more for all of us to know what it was, but there's like these 3 buildings in a row, we're down behind like a wall, and then it's up to ground level. And it was Fox 2, Fox 3, like a different squad that had a bunch of saw gunners, and we had this awesome plan, and it was like super gonna work, and then it just so didn't work.
Well, and like
Yeah.
what sucked about that?
It was for the moment that we were executing the plan and it was going as planned. For that moment, I was just like, I felt myself starting to get into the breathing of running and like just locked in on getting there. And then I got shot and was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I was just about, and like building off of that moment, like, so I was one of the first runners to get to that rusty old truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were in the little first wave.
So, and running up to that truck and having to duck down and like peek back up to cover you guys as you guys were running, it was scary and it was so cool. And like, granted, yeah, it failed, but there was this
so
other
good.
squad of LMGs that was also pushing the building, and they just stopped.
Gosh, I wish they had kept going.
If they kept going, we would have had it.
Anyway,
But-
yeah, that moment was the moment where we were all running and we had, like, we are all yelling back and forth, not in like a what the heck kind of way, but like we're not mad yelling. We're just like, keep shooting, let's go.
Yeah,
go.
we're
Like,
just communicating.
We were just in the moment doing what we had to do, and that's what it's all about, baby.
Yeah.
It's so funny because when I got shot, just like everybody else in that particular instance,
Yeah.
and so I'm sitting down in this field, and I got my kill rag on my head, and Bo Stewart, so the one of the co-owners of AMS, came up to me. He's like, "So that wasn't great." I was like, "Nope." He's like, "Why did you do that? Like, you could have." I was thinking you guys would go do this thing or go around or whatever, and I was like, "Nah, this seemed like this was a fun time decision. Like, this seemed like the right thing to do for us to have a bit of fun." He's like, "Yeah, I can't really blame you for that."
Hey,
I
you
was
know
like,
what?
Yeah.
You know what? All of us except Steve can say it could have gone worse, though.
No.
That's true. Yeah, poor Steve and getting
Poor
his tooth
Steve.
shot out. That was
I don't
not
think
great.
you've mentioned that on the show.
Poor Steve.
Nope.
Steve
Yeah,
did get his get
Shot
his
out.
teeth shot out a little bit,
but it's fixed
It's fixed now, so that's good.
For
but
the cost of an Iron
So-
Horse ticket.
oh boy,
yeah.
I was
so
just
listen.
like,
So the last,
I heard that happened, and I was like,
Mm.
oh my god.
yeah, back at did you see him back at Fob when he was squirting water through his? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So listen, last question now for you. So we've done all this cool stuff at Iron Horse. We talked about how it's changed your perspective. How is this going to change, or is this going to change the way that you are going to be airsofting in your community? Like, what are you bringing back from Iron Horse that you're like,
Definitely.
there's things that we want to change?
I mean, I can say, at least for me, I think I'm about to start committing to driving a little further. Once a month. Just that's the reason we don't play at a field, is there's nowhere within 2 hours of us. I think I might start doing that, but just the dedication to get more people at playing with us in our area, that's huge. It is complicated slightly because I'm about to be moving for work, and I'm going to be a little bit further away from here than is convenient.
Yeah.
And speaking for myself, honestly, I'm probably gonna run to Home Depot or somewhere and buy a few wood pallets.
Yes!
And build up some structures.
Places we can get some for free.
And so
You can usually get them for free, yeah.
And I'm probably just gonna build up some structures on our field just to give us some more environment, just some more immersement in that sort of sense. Just because, like, yeah, it's cool to like run through the woods and shoot at each other, but at the same time, it's so cool to have a spot where you can hold it and defend from other people.
It is so much more fun to have something
and
to play around and with and
building off of
absolutely
dedicating more time to get more people. I think I need to break out of my antisocial shell and talk to people, because I'm sure there's people interested in airsoft around here. Like
there's gotta be. I keep seeing people selling their stuff on Facebook because they're like, I don't ever play anymore because everywhere has closed in the last 10 years.
Yeah. And so for me, it's really going to be about building up our environment, building up our field to make it more enjoyable, and getting more people to come to our field, because the more people, the better.
Yeah,
for sure.
And especially if you're putting effort into it, I think airsofters appreciate other airsofters putting effort into things.
For real.
So if you're like, hey, we're building a field, like where this is what we're trying to do, like, that has appeal. I can speak for myself and say that if anyone here was like, hey, I'm trying to start my own airsoft field, do you want to come check it out? The answer is always going to be yes, right? And I mean, even if we've played on fields or places here over the years that people were like, hey, I'm trying to get something going. We're like, cool, we'll come check it out. And it's like, this sucks, right? Like it's this difficult to play on. It's not that it sucks, but it's difficult to play on. It's nothing we can do, or there's too many hikers or stuff like that. Whatever. Point is, I'll always say yes. And I think that's not a unique perspective for airsoft. I think if you have people in your community, especially people who are like at least interested in it, or like they have stuff they're trying to sell, and you can message them and be like, hey, don't sell it, come out to a game or something. Maybe, who knows? So I appreciate that.
I actually
perspective.
hadn't thought of doing that. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah,
you can have that one for free.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
But
yeah, I definitely appreciate that, because that's how we started too. Like when we started playing with 4 people, right?
Yeah.
Same deal.
Yeah,
it just takes time.
But yeah, and there's so many like things like personally that I'm definitely going to work on coming from Ironhorse, and it's definitely about like ammo management and placement and where I'm at on the field, because I mean at our field, like there's so many places where you can be and also can't be. Like on our field we've got this huge junk pile, and it's cool because like you can run around and get behind that junk pile and like wait a
It's
few
good
minutes.
visual obstruction.
And like it's cool, but to the detriment of that, there's a field of weeds that are waist high. And
all around it.
And if you're caught walking in that or crawling in that, you're done. You're done. Like there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, I caught our other guy crawling through those weeds at one point. Didn't even see him. I just saw like the very distinct guy-shaped trail, like trench being cut through the weeds, and so I just went. He was like, "Yeah, that's fair."
But yeah,
the field needs some work.
Yes, it's.
But I mean, you get out of it what you put into it too, right?
Exactly.
And I think if you start putting in the work, like I think you'll appreciate it more. And like I said, hopefully people come and check it out too. Yeah. And I can speak for myself, but June, what you were saying about like being willing to drive a little bit further, I can't drive further. I mean, I can drive wherever I want. It's just there's nothing out there. But the idea
you can drive into the Atlantic Ocean. Go play airsoft with the dolphins.
With the fish,
Fish chat.
But like the reality is like yes, fish chat. That's a deep cut. But yeah, like the reality is like now that I've seen, it's like, hey, you can actually travel and play airsoft.
Yeah.
Like you can do that, right? Like this Foreign Legion event is not going to be the last one. We're likely going to do one next year.
I don't not be the last one.
It certainly won't, because it's actually feasible. It's actually something that's doable, and also it's effective. Like it's not just we showed up and played a game and it was like disparate 26 people just doing whatever. It was like, no, we showed up and we played as a team for a whole weekend, and that was pretty friggin' cool. And I would like to do that again. And I think
for next time,
many people do.
For next time, I know to block out more time for actually getting to the cookout.
Yes, definitely less.
Now I know to go to Walmart
before.
After.
No, before we even as we were checking into the hotel.
Yeah,
that would have been
smarter.
Next time we're gonna have 3 VRBOs. None of this hotel business. No,
next time we just gotta find one big.
No, one big tent. We're all slamming into one tent.
I think they call that a yurt. I'm not sure, or pavilion.
I think that idea is incredible. We should do it.
We'll workshop it. I think it needs a little bit of work. Guys, I want to say thank you for taking the time to have this conversation today. Thank you for coming out to Ironhorse. It was an absolute privilege to be able to meet and play with the two of you and everybody else. But I mean, you're the two that I have in front of me right now. So likewise. A huge thank you. It is hard to put into words the impact that you all have had on me. So I just want you to know that I very much appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate you coming on and talking and sharing your experiences and perspectives
Thank
with
you
me
for
today.
having us.
Oh, it's an absolute treat. It's the easiest part of my day.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you so much. If you are listening and you want to have conversations with June and Carter, September and Rook, you can join us on the Discord. The link is in the description. But until then, that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week.